You think you know the story. The steadfast monarch, the unwavering duty, the flawless public image etched into history. But what if the most carefully guarded secret of the 20th century British monarchy wasn't tucked away in a classified government file, but lived and breathed, walking among us for decades, unknown? This is not a scandal sheet fantasy. This is the account of Thomas Tom Reginald Pembroke, a man who served as a senior security officer for the royal household for over 30 years. Now, in his twilight years, burdened by a promise that has weighed upon his conscience for a lifetime, he has decided to speak. What he reveals will challenge the official narrative forever, not through gossip, but through the quiet, devastating detail of a life observed from the inside. This is his testimony. Prepare to see the crown through the eyes of the man sworn to protect its deepest shadows. The rain pattered a soft, steady rhythm against the leaded windows of the cottage, a sound Tom Pembroke had come to find comforting in his retirement. It was a world away from the clipped gravel of palace courtyards and the hushed, echoing corridors of power. Here, in the quiet of the Cotswolds, the only protocols were his own. At 82, his back was still straight. His gaze still held the assessing sharpness of a man used to noticing everything, but the hands resting on the worn leather of his journal were mottled with age. He opened the book. It wasn't a diary, not in the sentimental sense. It was a log. Dates, times, movements, observations, the professional habit of a lifetime in royal security. His finger traced an entry from the late summer of 1955. Sandringham, Northwest Perimeter check. 2,300 hours, all secure. He remembered that night with a clarity that chilled him. It had not been all secure. Not at all. He had been young then, newly transferred to the personal protection detail after distinguished service elsewhere. Eager, fiercely loyal, and painfully aware of the immense trust placed in him. The Queen had been young too, just a few years into her monumental role, the weight of the post-war world settling on her shoulders. That particular August, the court was in retreat at Sandringham. The atmosphere had been tense. The Prime Minister of the day was pushing for a resolution to a certain overseas crisis, and the pressure on the monarch was palpable. On the night in question, Tom was on the late watch. His route took him along the wooded fringe of the estate, far from the main house. A flicker of movement near the old gardener's bothy, a structure supposed to be locked, caught his eye. Protocol dictated he call it in. Instinct made him move in silently. As he approached, he heard not an intruder, but the unmistakable sound of a woman's quiet weeping, swiftly shushed. Then, an infant's soft cry. His hand went to his torch, his mind racing through threats. He pushed the door open, the beam cutting through the dusty interior. It was not a kidnapper or a spy. It was a young woman he recognized immediately from the household staff. Mary Ann, a quiet, capable girl from the linen room. She was white as a sheet, clutching a tiny bundle to her chest. And beside her, an arm around her shoulders, face pale, but composed in the torchlight, was the Queen. Not Queen Elizabeth II, the figurehead, but Elizabeth Windsor, a young woman in a simple headscarf and overcoat, her eyes wide with a fear and desperation Tom had never seen in her before. "Officer Pembroke," she said, her voice low but steady. "You must be silent." The world seemed to stop. Tom snapped off the torch, plunging them into near darkness, his training wrestling with utter shock. "Your Majesty, is there a threat?" "The only threat," the Queen whispered, "is a world that cannot understand. This child, this boy, needs safety, not publicity, not scandal. He needs a life." Marianne sobbed quietly. The Queen's grip on her tightened. "Marianne has a sister in Dorset. She is married to a good man, a farmer. They have longed for a child and cannot have one. They will take him. They will raise him as their own. No one can ever know." Tom's mind reeled. The implications were catastrophic, constitutional, religious, political, personal. The infant, a son born outside of any recognized union, in an era where such a thing was unthinkable for a monarch. The father? That question hung terrifyingly unasked in the air. It was a secret that could destabilize everything. "Your Majesty," the security implications, the procedure. He stammered. "There is no procedure for this, Pembroke," she said, and in her voice he heard the steel that would define her reign. "There's only duty. My duty to this boy is to give him a chance at a normal life, away from this gilded cage. Your duty is to your sovereign. I am asking you, not as your queen, but as a mother pleading for her child's future. Help us. See him safe to Dorset, and then never speak of it again." She looked at him, and in that moment the power dynamic dissolved. He was not a servant and a monarch. He was a man and a woman, and she was entrusting him with her most vulnerable truth. Tom Pembroke made his choice. He gave a slow, stiff nod. "What is required, ma'am?" The next 48 hours were a blur of clandestine planning. Tom used his authority to schedule a security exercise that involved a discreet vehicle leaving the estate at dawn. He himself drove, the baby, now sedated with a doctor's careful dose, hidden in a specially arranged compartment. Marianne, heartbroken but resolute, followed in a separate car. He saw the raw agony on the young queen's face as she kissed the baby's forehead one last time in the pre-dawn gloom of the bothy. It was a look of pure, unroyal grief that would haunt him forever. The drive to Dorset was the longest of his life. Every police car, every curious pedestrian, was a potential disaster. He delivered the child to the anxious, joyful couple on their remote farm. He saw the hope in their eyes, the promise of a family. He gave them a sealed envelope, contents unknown, from the Queen. He instructed them, in the coldest official tone he could muster, that they were never to contact the palace, and that their child's origin was a state secret of the highest order. They agreed, terrified and elated. When he returned to Sandringham, the Queen summoned him. She was alone in her private sitting room, the mantle of sovereignty firmly back in place. But her eyes were red-rimmed. "You have done a great service, Pembroke, a service to the crown, and to me. This must be your secret now, as it is mine. You will be my confidant in this matter alone. You will oversee, from a distance, his well-being. Reports will come to you, and you will bring them to me once a year. No one else, not my husband, not my mother, not the government, must ever know. Do you understand?" "I do, Your Majesty." "Then, from today, you're not just an officer. You are the keeper of this truth, and you must keep it until the day you die." Tom bowed. He had taken an oath to protect the monarch. He never imagined that oath would mean guarding her from her own heartbreak. The young boy in Dorset, named Samuel by his new parents, began his life unaware. And Tom Pembroke began his long, lonely vigil as the sole bridge between two worlds that could never meet. The weight of the secret became a part of Tom, like a second spine. It altered his perspective on everything within the gilded world he protected. He watched Prince Charles and Princess grow, their every scraped knee and birthday party photographed, and he would think of the boy in Dorset, Samuel, building hay bales and feeding lambs. He received the annual reports, forwarded through a circuitous, secure route, a plain envelope within another envelope, delivered to a dead letter box. He would take the inner packet to the Queen during her annual stay at Balmoral, always in a private moment, always with the same solemn ritual. She would ask, "Do you have the weather report from the south, Pembroke?" "I do, ma'am," he would reply, handing her the papers. She would read them in silence, her face an immaculate mask, betraying nothing. But he saw the slight tremor in her hands once, when the report mentioned Samuel had won a scholarship to a minor public school. Another year, she lingered over a line describing a childhood bout of pneumonia, her knuckles white on the page. She never asked a follow-up question. She never wept. She simply absorbed the information, locked it away behind her eyes, and returned the papers to him to be destroyed. It was a ritual of silent motherhood, conducted in the shadow of the crown. Tom's career advanced. His unique, unspoken bond with the sovereign granted him an unassailable position. He became a senior security coordinator, privy to the most sensitive details of royal life, but none as sensitive as the one he already held. He married a kind woman named Eleanor, a schoolteacher who knew only that her husband did important, confidential work. He loved her, but the core of his life was walled off. The lie of omission between them was a quiet, constant presence. He managed the Dorset situation with meticulous care. He would make discreet visits to the market town near the farm, observing from a distance. He saw Samuel grow from a sturdy toddler into a lanky, bright-eyed boy who favored practical work on the farm over his books. He looked nothing like the Windsor side. His features were softer, his hair darker. The question of paternity burned in Tom's mind, but he dared not speculate, even in his private thoughts. It was a box he could never open. The secret also changed how he saw Prince Philip. He watched the Duke's sometimes brusque manner, his frustration with the constraints of his role, and Tom felt a pang of a terrible, unspeakable sympathy. Did he know? Tom was almost certain he did not. The Queen's burden was borne alone. This secret was her solitary cross, and Tom was its silent witness. The years turned. The swinging 60s came and went, barely causing a ripple behind the palace gates. The annus horribilis of 1992, with its fires and divorces, played out. Through it all, Tom maintained his watch. Samuel grew up, studied agricultural science at a provincial university, and returned to run the family farm after his adoptive father died. He married a local girl, a teacher named Fiona. Tom, posing as a retired civil servant with an interest in land management, even attended the village fete where Samuel and Fiona were showing a prize sheep. He shook Samuel's hand, a firm, calloused grip, the hand of a working man. Samuel had his mother's eyes, a clear, direct blue, though he didn't know it. The resemblance, to Tom who had spent a lifetime studying the Queen's face, was momentarily staggering. "It's good land," Samuel had said conversationally. "Hard work, but honest." "The most honest kind," Tom had replied, his throat tight. The report that year contained a wedding photo. Tom delivered it at Balmoral. The Queen, older now, her hair gray, took the file. She opened it, saw the picture of Samuel in his suit, Fiona beaming beside him. Her breath hitched just once. A tiny, almost imperceptible sound. She stared at it for a full minute, then closed the folder and handed it back. "Thank you, Pembroke," she said, her voice husky. "He looks content." "He is, ma'am. A good man." A single tear escaped then, tracing a quick path down her powdered cheek. She did not wipe it away. "You have kept your promise with great dignity." "I am grateful." That was the most she ever spoke of it. The unspoken love in that room was a physical thing, vast and sorrowful. Tom left feeling he had witnessed something sacred and profoundly lonely. But the world was changing. The age of deference was ending. The press grew more invasive, more ruthless. The idea of a secret remaining secret forever began to feel like a fantasy. Tom started to feel not just like a keeper, but like a man sitting on a fault line, waiting for the tremor that would make everything collapse. The new millennium dawned, and with it, a digital age that made secrecy seem like a quaint, bygone notion. Tom was in his late 60s, nearing retirement, but the secret had no retirement age. He watched with mounting dread as every minor royal indiscretion was splashed across the internet, picked apart by bloggers and commentators. The sanctity of private grief, which the Queen had always clung to, was being eroded daily. Samuel's life, meanwhile, followed its steady, unremarkable course. He and Fiona had 2 children, a boy, James, and a girl, Lily. The annual reports now included school photos. Tom saw the Queen's face in Lily's smile, an echo of a young Princess Elizabeth that took his breath away. The genetic thread, silently weaving through a simple Dorset family, was undeniable. He destroyed each report as always, but the images were seared into his memory. A crisis point arrived from an unexpected direction. In 2002, Samuel's adoptive mother, the woman who had raised him as her own, fell seriously ill. On her deathbed, overwhelmed by medication and emotion, she whispered a confused confession to Samuel about a great lady and a great sacrifice. She spoke of a security officer and a nighttime journey. She died before she could explain, leaving Samuel with a haunting incomplete puzzle. A few months later, Tom received a letter, not through the official channel, but to his home address, which was not publicly listed. The handwriting was unfamiliar. It read, "To the retired officer who used to ask about our land. My mother, before she passed, mentioned a man like you. She said you might know something about where I came from. I have questions. I would appreciate the courtesy of a reply. Samuel Ainsley." Tom's blood ran cold. The secret, dormant for nearly 50 years, was stirring. He followed protocol. He took the letter to the Queen. It was at Windsor Castle, in the aftermath of the Queen Mother's funeral. The atmosphere was one of profound sorrow. The Queen looked exhausted, grief etched deep into her face. She read Samuel's letter in silence, her expression unchanging. When she finished, she placed it carefully on her desk. "He has a right to know," she said, her voice a whisper of its usual strength. But knowing could destroy his life. The press would descend. His family would be torn apart. He would become a spectacle. And if he seeks answers on his own, ma'am, Tom ventured. The world is different now. A DNA test, a curious journalist. She closed her eyes. "I cannot see him. It would not be safe. For him, or for the institution. But he cannot be left with this half-truth. It is a cruelty." She opened her eyes, and they were filled with a resolve that overcame the weariness. "You must go. You must meet him. You must tell him the truth of his birth and of my decision. Explain why it was done, given the context. But you must also make him understand the consequence of revealing it. For his children, for Fiona, for the stability he has built." "Me, ma'am? Should it not come from—" "From whom?" she asked, a flash of the old steel returning. "From a lawyer? A courtier? You were there, Pembroke. You are the only living link besides myself. You represent both my authority and my regret. He will believe you." Tom felt the weight of this new, impossible duty settle on his shoulders. He was to be the messenger, finally, speaking the words he had guarded for a lifetime. The meeting was arranged in a neutral, anonymous location, a quiet hotel lounge in Winchester. Samuel was there, looking nervous and out of place in a suit. He was a handsome man in his late 40s, with that direct blue gaze. "Mr. Pembroke," Samuel said, shaking his hand. "Thank you for coming." They ordered tea. The small talk was agonizing. Finally, Samuel leaned forward. "My mother's last words, they've driven me mad. Who am I?" Tom took a deep breath, the oath he swore in 1955 echoing in his mind. But he had a new order now from the same source. "Samuel," he began, his voice low and grave, "what I am about to tell you is the absolute truth. It is a state secret of the highest sensitivity. You must prepare yourself." And then he told him. He started with that night in Sandringham. The weeping, the infant, the young queen's desperate plea. He explained the political and religious turmoil of the time, the absolute impossibility of the situation. He described the drive to Dorset, his role as the go-between, the annual reports. He did not shy away from the Queen's grief, her silent vigilance, her terrible choice between her duty and her child. Samuel listened, his face passing through stages of shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, a dazed, profound sorrow. He said nothing for a long time, staring into his cold tea. So he finally said, his voice thick, "My mother is the Queen. Yes. And my father? That," Tom said carefully, "is not information I possess. It was never spoken of. Your mother, the Queen, has never disclosed it. I believe she has carried that alone." Samuel gave a bitter, choked laugh. All these years, a life on a farm, all this normalcy, and it was all a lie arranged from on high. It was a sacrifice, Tom said firmly, made by a very young woman who believed, with all her heart, that it was the only way to give you a chance at a free life. She has watched over you, Samuel. She has grieved for you in silence every single day. She chose your pain and her own over the chaos that would have consumed you both. Tom slid a sealed envelope across the table. "This is from her. For you. It is the only direct communication you will ever receive." Samuel took it with trembling hands, but did not open it. The weight of history was in that envelope. "What do I do now?" he whispered, looking utterly lost. "You live your life," Tom said. "You protect your family. You honor the sacrifice, both yours and hers, by continuing to build the honest, good life you have. To go public would be a nuclear explosion. It would hurt everyone you love and tarnish the memory of the woman who gave you up out of love, not indifference." Tom left him sitting there, clutching the unopened letter, a man whose world had just been utterly rewritten. The secret was no longer between Tom and the monarch. It was now a shared, painful truth with the man at its center. The burden had shifted, but for Tom, the watch was not over. It had just entered its most dangerous phase. The meeting with Samuel opened a fissure in Tom's carefully ordered world. The secret was no longer a silent artifact of the past. It was a live, emotional reality walking the earth. He felt a constant, low-grade anxiety, scanning news headlines for any hint of a story brewing in Dorset. He retired fully shortly after, but retirement was just a change of address. His mind remained on duty. Samuel, to his immense credit, did not go public. The Queen's letter, the contents of which Tom never learned, seemed to have provided a measure of peace, or at least closure. The annual reports ceased. The link was now direct and broken. Tom understood. Some bridges, once crossed, could not be recrossed. He focused on his own life, on Eleanor, on his garden. He tried to bury the memories, but they surfaced at odd moments. Seeing a blue-eyed girl on television, the smell of rain on earth, the sound of a baby crying in a supermarket. He was a vessel that had held a historic truth for too long. It had seeped into his very bones. As the Queen entered her 90s, a global icon of stability, Tom felt a pressing urgency. He was older than her. He was the last living soul who had been in that gardener's bothy. When he died, the full, nuanced truth, the fear, the love, the impossible choice would die with him. All that would remain would be the brittle, shocking fact, ripe for the tabloids to distort. He began to feel that his oath to keep it until the day you die was, in the modern world, a disservice to history and to the truth of the people involved. He started to write, not for publication, but as a testament. He wrote in his journal, detailing everything with the precision of the security officer he was. Dates, locations, dialogues recalled as accurately as his aging memory allowed. He wrote of the Queen's anguish, of Samuel's solid decency, of his own lonely vigil. He wrote not to accuse, but to explain, to show that history is not made in grand speeches alone, but in silent, heart-rending decisions made in dusty outbuildings in the dead of night. He showed the journal to no one, not even Eleanor. It was his private absolution. Then, in 2022, the Queen died. Tom watched the funeral procession on television, the solemn pageantry, the global mourning. He saw Charles, now king, his face lined with grief and duty. And he thought of Samuel, watching in his Dorset living room, grieving for a mother the world mourned as a monarch. Two sons, one born in the spotlight, the other in shadow, both now motherless. The full weight of his knowledge now felt like a historical artifact without a curator. The new king did not know. The government did not know. The world did not know. Only Tom and Samuel held the pieces. A month after the funeral, a letter arrived. From Samuel. His handwriting was steadier now. He wrote simply that Fiona had passed after a short illness, that his children were grown, that with both his adoptive mother and his birth mother gone, he felt untethered. He wrote, "I find I need to understand it all, Mr. Pembroke. Not just the fact, but the why, the how. For my children's sake, so they might know their own story one day, if they choose. Would you see me?" Tom knew the time for final reckoning had come. He invited Samuel to his cottage. Samuel arrived, looking older, wearier, but with a calm determination. They sat in Tom's study, the rain again at the windows. "I won't cause trouble," Samuel said preemptively. "I made that promise to myself, and to her, after I read her letter. But I cannot go to my grave with my children ignorant of half their heritage. It's a biological truth. It matters." Tom nodded slowly. "Understand. I have been giving it much thought since Her Majesty passed. He gestured to the worn journal on his desk. I have written it down. Everything. As I witnessed it. Samuel's eyes widened. For the public? No, Tom said firmly. For history. For your family. For the record. The public version would be a feeding frenzy. It would reduce a profound human story to a tawdry headline. But a private, documented truth held by you and your heirs that has value. He explained his fear, that upon his death, the secret would either burst out in a distorted, malicious way or be lost forever, doing a disservice to the complexity of the Queen's decision and Samuel's life. I am proposing, Tom said, that I give this journal to you. It is your story more than anyone's. You decide what to do with it. Keep it, show it to your children when you feel the time is right, or eventually, perhaps long after we are all gone, deposit it in an archive with a 100-year seal. But the full truth in context will survive. Samuel was silent for a long time, looking at the journal as if it were a holy relic. You've carried this all these years. For her. For me. It was my duty, Tom said. But duty must have a purpose. Its purpose was to protect you both. Now, I believe protecting the integrity of the story is the final act of that duty. Samuel reached out, his hand hovering over the leather cover. May I? Tom pushed it toward him. Samuel opened it, his eyes scanning the precise handwriting, the entry for August 1955. He read a few lines, then closed his eyes, overcome. Thank you, he whispered, for your service, for your silence, and now for your truth. They talked for hours. For the first time, Tom shared his own burdens, the loneliness, the constant vigilance, the impact on his marriage. Samuel spoke of his confusion, his anger, his eventual, hard-won acceptance. Two old men, bound by a secret that had shaped their lives, finally able to speak freely. When Samuel left, taking the journal with him, Tom felt an unexpected lightness. The weight was not gone, but it was shared, and it had been given a proper, dignified vessel. He had kept his oath to the end. He had kept the secret until his death was near. And in transferring it, he felt he had finally completed his mission. The keeper could stand down. The final years of Tom Pembroke's life were, for the first time since 1955, truly his own. The gnawing anxiety had subsided, replaced by a quiet, melancholic peace. He knew Samuel had the testament. The truth was safe, not in the corrosive light of publicity, but in the careful hands of the man it belonged to. He and Eleanor traveled, took simple pleasures in their garden, and spoke of the past in broad, happy strokes. The wall within him remained, but it no longer felt like a prison wall. He thought often of the Queen, not the global icon, but the young woman in the headscarf, her eyes full of fear and love. He believed, more than ever, that she had made the only choice she could. The modern world might judge her harshly, but it had not lived in her world under those pressures at that time. He had been her instrument, and he had no regrets. Samuel wrote to him occasionally brief, warm letters updating him on his children. James had taken over much of the farm. Lily was studying history at university, a fact that made Tom smile. The genetic thread continued in its quiet, unexpected ways. Samuel never mentioned the journal, and Tom never asked. It was theirs, but it was now Samuel's to steward. Tom's health began a slow, inevitable decline. In his final days, in a hospice room filled with flowers, his mind was clear. Eleanor held his hand. His children and grandchildren visited. His life, on its own terms, had been full and honorable. On the last afternoon, as a soft light slanted through the window, he found himself thinking not of Sandringham, but of Balmoral. He remembered the crisp autumn air, the smell of pine, and the Queen standing by a window, holding the annual report. The way she would stand perfectly still, absorbing the life of the son she could never hold. In that memory, he did not see a monarch, but a human heart, colossal in its capacity for both duty and love. He passed quietly, with Eleanor's name on his lips. A week after the modest funeral, a package arrived for Samuel Ainsley at his Dorset farm. It was from Tom's solicitor. Inside, alongside some minor personal effects Tom had wanted him to have, a pair of cufflinks, a fountain pen, with a final letter. Samuel, if you are reading this, I have joined our mutual friend in whatever lies beyond. Do not mourn. My work is done, and I go in peace. I write with one final thought. You have lived the life she wished for you. Honest, rooted, real. In doing so, you have been her greatest, if most secret, success. The crown she wore was heavy, but the crown of motherhood she was denied was, I believe, a heavier weight in her heart. You bore it for her by living well. The journal is yours. Your story is yours. Guard it, not as a secret to be ashamed of, but as a truth of love and sacrifice. Tell your children when you are ready. Let them know their grandmother was a woman of immense courage, who loved their father enough to let him go. You were and are a good man. That is the only legacy that ever truly matters. Yours in respect, Tom. Samuel read the letter in his farmhouse kitchen, the morning sun warming the old stone flags. He felt a profound sadness, but also a deep sense of connection. He walked to a locked drawer in his study and took out the journal. He ran his hand over the cover. Then he went to his bookshelf and pulled out a large, beautiful family Bible, a wedding gift from Fiona. Inside, he had fashioned a careful hollow. He placed Tom's journal inside. It fit perfectly. He closed the Bible and returned it to the shelf, amongst other volumes of local history and agricultural manuals. It was safe. It was home. It was part of the family history now, waiting for the right time, perhaps for Lily with her historian's mind, to discover and understand. Later that day, Samuel went for a walk across his fields. He stopped at the highest point where he could see for miles his land, his life. He thought of Tom, of the Queen, of the incredible hidden thread that connected this simple, muddy landscape to the very pinnacle of history. He was not a prince. He was a farmer. But he knew now, with absolute certainty, that he was also a son and a father and a link in a chain of silent, profound love. The wind picked up, rustling the barley. It carried no secrets, only the clean, earthy smell of growth and continuity. The long-hidden story was at rest, not in the scandal sheets, but in the heart of the man who had lived it, guarded by the family it had created. And in that, Tom Pembroke's final duty was gloriously, perfectly complete.